She was bullied for being obese. Her transformation silenced everyone in work meetings. No one looked her in the eye. On dates, men would say, "You have such a pretty face." Too bad. Even among friends, she felt like she took up too much space, like she had to apologize just for existing. For years, she believed she was invisible. Until one day, she realized she didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She went through a quiet transformation. And when she reappeared, she silenced everyone who had judged her by her body. This is Isabela's story and how she turned the tables. Not just on others, but on herself. Isabela, 29, lived in silence. Not because she liked solitude, but because she had learned that sometimes speaking hurt more than staying quiet. She worked in a modern office, surrounded by friendly coworkers, or at least that's how they acted. She was competent, kind, always on time, yet somehow overlooked. In meetings, her ideas went unheard. Moments later, someone else would say the same thing and get all the praise. She would smile faintly, like she already knew how the story ended. At the office cafe, she caught the quiet laughs when she reached for a dessert. Backhanded advice disguised as care. "You should try low carb." It's magic. Or loaded questions like, "Are you sure that's healthy?" Isabela wasn't lazy. She wasn't weak. But she lived with a kind of judgment that left no visible bruises, only internal scars. The kind of judgment that starts with stares and ends in silence. She was constantly reminded that, for many people, a woman's value was still measured by her reflection. And hers, their eyes seemed to say, wasn't acceptable. On dating apps, the rejection was even more brutal. "You seem nice, but you're not my type. Maybe if you lost 40 pounds, or just the silence of messages left unread." But the cruelest comments were the ones that started nice. "You have such a pretty face, double quotes always followed by that. Painful, but those words echoed long after they were said. They layered like dust on her self-worth, which once shined, but had dimmed over time. She started believing the problem really was her, that maybe she deserved to be overlooked. She began avoiding mirrors, wore only dark, loose clothes. She didn't want to stand out. All she wanted was to fit in, to be accepted, to belong. But the more she tried to disappear, the more invisible she became. Until one day, something changed. It wasn't a cruel comment or a breaking point. It was something quiet, an ordinary day, home alone, sitting at the edge of her bed. Isabela looked at herself in the mirror, truly looked, for the first time in months. And for the first time, she didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't hate what she saw. She just stared, and in that silence, she decided she would no longer be a prisoner to other people's opinions. This is Isabela's story of how she went from invisible to impossible, to ignore. Isabela was always quiet. She didn't like crowds. She never craved attention. She worked as a financial analyst in a mid-sized company, reliable, kind, focused, invisible. She never arrived late. Never missed a deadline, but in meetings, her presence barely registered. She was one of those people who kept the engine running behind the scenes, while others got the spotlight. She lived alone in a small apartment downtown. She liked cooking, watching old movies, and caring for her plants. From the outside, it looked like a normal life. But inside, she constantly felt misplaced, like she was living in a body the world didn't know what to do with. She had struggled with her weight since adolescence. She had tried every diet imaginable. Some worked for a while. Most didn't. A few only brought guilt. She lost weight, gained it back, again and again. But the hardest part wasn't the number on the scale. It was how people treated her because of it. Her friends invited her out, but she was always the funny friend, never the beautiful one. On dating apps, the attention was rare, and when it came, it was often superficial, cruel, or fetishizing. She got tired of trying, tired of hearing, "You've got such a pretty face." But you're just not my type. Even everyday moments, shopping, doctor visits, asking for help came with that look. The look that said, "You're not healthy. You don't care about yourself. You don't belong here." But what hurt Isabela most was the feeling of constant overcompensation. She felt like she had to be extra kind, extra competent, extra polite, as if she needed to prove she was worthy of respect, despite her body. She wasn't always sad. She had real laughs, good memories, moments of light. But the sense of inadequacy never left. It was like a tight dress she couldn't take off. And time passed. She started declining invitations, canceling dates, avoiding social settings. Not because she didn't want to go, but because she was afraid of being judged, afraid of being compared, afraid of not being enough. At 29 years old, Isabela felt like she was living only half a life. Smart, capable, full of potential, yet trapped in a body that, according to everyone else, wasn't good enough. But what no one knew was that Isabela was about to change, not for vanity, but for survival. The world doesn't always scream when it wants to hurt you. Sometimes ... It whispers. And for Isabela, the whispers came from everywhere, masked as jokes, glances, silence, or pity. One of the most humiliating moments happened at a wedding. She had finally agreed to attend a friend's celebration, a big fancy event. She spent days looking for a dress, nervous but hopeful. On the big day, she walked into the venue feeling proud until she heard the snicker. Two women standing by the buffet, whispering loud enough for her to hear, "That dress is really ... brave. She should have gone for something more ... forgiving." Her smile faded. She laughed along, pretending she hadn't heard. But inside, something cracked. At work, it was more subtle. Her manager would invite her to meetings, but never ask her opinion. During client visits, she was introduced as the assistant, even though she was a lead analyst. Once during a team lunch, her plate had a dessert on it. Someone across the table said, half joking, "Are you sure you need that?" Everyone laughed, so did she, but her hands shook under the table. These weren't isolated incidents. This was her normal. Even her family, without meaning to be cruel, added to the weight. Her mother would say, "I'm just worried about your health," but it always came after a photo was posted or during family meals when Isabela served herself a little too freely. At birthdays, her uncle would comment, "Another diet down the drain." All of it, the sarcasm, the passive remarks, the constant reminder that she didn't fit, it built up, like drops of water filling a glass ... until it overflowed, and eventually, Isabela stopped fighting back. She just ... shrank, not in body, but in spirit. She avoided mirrors, hid in plain sight, did everything to not be seen, because every time she was seen, it hurt. But deep inside, a voice remained, a quiet one. A voice that said, "You weren't born to be small. You were just made to believe you should be." That voice would grow louder soon. Some moments break you loudly. Others do it in silence. For Isabela, the breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came in the quiet of a Tuesday evening. She had just come home from work. The office had been brutal that day, not because of the workload, but because of the constant feeling that she didn't belong. A new intern had joined the team, and already, she was the one getting invited to after-work drinks. Isabela was once again forgotten. She dropped her purse on the couch and stood in the hallway, staring at herself in the mirror by the door. Her makeup was smudged. Her blouse clung to her in ways she hated. Her eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from holding back everything she wanted to say. And then something happened. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there and felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. Just emptiness. It scared her. Because even pain meant she was still feeling, but that night, she felt hollow. Like she had lost not just her confidence, but her identity. She walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the bigger mirror. This time, she didn't look away. She studied every part of her reflection. Her face, her stomach, her arms, not with judgment, but with clarity. It wasn't self-hate anymore. It was acceptance. Acceptance that she couldn't keep living like this. Not because of how others saw her, but because she had stopped seeing herself. Isabela realized that the version of her people mocked, the one they dismissed, underestimated, laughed at, wasn't the real her. It was a version shaped by years of shame, silence, and survival. But deep down, she was still there, waiting. That night, she made a decision. No crash diets, no fake promises, no trying to earn validation from people who didn't deserve her. She would take control on her terms. It started with research. Quiet nights reading about bariatric surgery, health risks, emotional consequences, long-term commitment. She didn't rush. She didn't make impulsive decisions. She consulted doctors, asked questions, faced the fear, because yes, she was afraid. Afraid of the surgery, afraid of failing again. Afraid of hoping for too much, but more than anything, she was afraid of waking up years later, still hiding, still shrinking, still apologizing for existing. And that fear was greater than her doubt. This wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about finally becoming who she was all along. Making the decision was just the beginning. Isabela didn't wake up the next day full of motivation or certainty. She woke up scared. Scared of the process. Scared of people finding out. Scared of failing in public again. But this time, something was different. The fear was still there, yes. But it wasn't stronger than her determination. She started small. She changed her eating habits, not out of hate for her body, but out of care. She replaced guilt with information. She didn't punish herself for slipping up. She learned, then came the doctors, appointments, evaluations, blood tests, psychological assessments. The bariatric surgery wasn't just a physical process. It demanded emotional readiness, something no one warned her about. The therapist asked questions no one had ever asked her before. What does your weight protect you from? Who do you become if the pain goes away? Those questions hit harder than any insult ever had. Because they forced her to face not only her body, but her history. Isabela realized she wasn't just carrying fat. She was carrying trauma, years of swallowing emotions, of putting herself last. Every pound had a story. Every scar had a voice. Still, she moved forward. She stopped making excuses. Stopped waiting for the perfect time. She told no one but a close friend, not because she was ashamed, but because she didn't want noise. She wanted this for herself, quietly, intentionally. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday. The night before, she stood in the mirror again. But this time, it was different. She didn't cry. She didn't feel broken. She placed her hand gently over her stomach, breathed deeply, and whispered, "Thank you for carrying me this far. Now I'll carry myself." The surgery wasn't glamorous. It was painful, slow, humbling. The first few days were hard, nausea, discomfort, strict liquid diets, exhaustion. But through the pain, something new began to grow, resilience. For the first time in years, Isabela felt like she was doing something for herself. Not to fit in, not to get approval, but because she wanted to. Live fully, honestly, freely. And that was the beginning of everything. Change isn't loud. Sometimes it starts in silence, with one woman deciding she's worth saving. The physical transformation didn't happen overnight. There were no dramatic TV reveals, no crowds clapping, no bright studio lights. There was only Isabela in her apartment, day by day, rebuilding her life in silence. The first few months after surgery were the hardest. Her body was healing, her routine was unrecognizable. She had to relearn how to eat, how to move, how to be in her own skin. Some days she felt amazing, other days she felt like a stranger to herself. Why am I still tired? Why do I still feel invisible, even now? Wasn't this supposed to fix everything? Because here's the truth no one tells you. Weight loss doesn't erase your past. It doesn't remove years of insecurity or undo emotional wounds. But it creates space to heal, to grow, to finally see yourself clearly and slowly. That's exactly what began to happen. Her clothes started to fit differently, then they didn't fit at all. She donated old pieces, one by one, not out of shame, but out of gratitude. Each one carried a version of her that no longer needed to be held onto. She started walking more, then jogging, then dancing again, something she hadn't done since her teens. She looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. She wore color. She made eye contact. And for the first time, she felt visible. But the most powerful change wasn't her waistline, it was her voice. She spoke up more in meetings. People listened. She was no longer the quiet one in the background. She went to a cafe alone, something that once terrified her, and sat by the window, reading a book, unapologetically taking up space. One morning, she stepped on the scale and realized she didn't care about the number. Because something bigger had shifted. She was no longer waiting for permission to feel proud. She had earned it. This wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who she was before the world taught her to hide. Now, when people saw Isabela, they were surprised. Yes, her body had changed, but her energy, her posture, her eyes, her presence, that's what silenced them. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She didn't need validation. She had become whole by choosing herself over and over again. The universe doesn't always give you dramatic revenge. Sometimes it gives you a moment, just one moment, to show who you've become without saying a word. For Isabela, that moment came unexpectedly. Several, actually. It started at the office. She had walked into the same building for years, unnoticed, just another face behind a screen. But now people greeted her differently. Some didn't even recognize her at first. A coworker who used to cut her off in meetings now asked for her input. The manager who once introduced her as the assistant asked her to lead a project. But Isabela had changed on the inside too. She wasn't looking for applause anymore. She responded professionally, calmly. She didn't say, "See? I told you I was capable." She just let her work speak for itself, and it did. Then came the high school reunion. She didn't want to go at first. The thought of walking into a room full of people who once saw her as less than made her stomach turn. But she wasn't that version of herself anymore. She walked in, confident but grounded, heads turned, old. Classmates whispered. One of the guys who once ignored her in the hallways came over, smiling, a drink in hand. "Wow, I barely recognized you. You look incredible." She smiled politely and said, "Thanks. I didn't change for you to notice. But I'm glad you did. No bitterness, just truth." Then came the one she wasn't expecting. An ex, the guy who once told her she had a pretty face, but he reached out online, a casual message. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Want to catch up?" She stared at the message for a moment. Felt nothing, not anger, not interest, just peace. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Sometimes the best revenge is not becoming someone else. It's becoming yourself fully and letting them watch. Isabela didn't seek confrontation. She didn't throw her transformation in anyone's face. She just showed up confident, calm, complete. The irony, The same people who once ignored her were now seeking her attention. But she no longer needed theirs because her validation came from within. True power isn't proving them wrong. It's knowing you were never wrong to begin with. What do you do when the world that once ignored you finally starts to see you? Do you forgive? Do you confront? Do you walk away? Isabela asked herself those questions more than once. Now that she had become everything they said she couldn't, stronger, healthier, uncheckable, people from her past were showing up again. Some were apologetic, some were embarrassed, others pretended like nothing ever happened. And that's when Isabela realized something powerful. She didn't owe anyone a performance. Not grace, not revenge, not an explanation. Just because they had changed their behavior didn't mean she had to reopen doors that she had already closed. Some people she forgave not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Others she ignored not out of cruelty, but because not everyone gets to come with you when you grow. And then there was herself. Because in the end, the hardest person to forgive was her. Forgive for staying silent when she should have spoken. For shrinking herself. For believing the lies. But even that she released, not all at once, and not without tears, but day by day, she let go of the shame. The guilt, the weight she had carried that had nothing to do with pounds. Real redemption doesn't come when others change. It comes when you stop needing them to. Her life began to fill with new people, ones who saw her as a whole person, not just a before and after story. She built new habits, healthier routines, stronger boundaries. She no longer over-explained her choices. No longer tried to soften herself to make others comfortable. She didn't have to be loud. She just had to be honest. One day, she looked at an old photo of herself, the version everyone had judged. And instead of cringing, she smiled, because that girl survived. That girl carried the pain, the silence, the rejection, and still woke up. Every day trying to love herself in a world that told her not to. She didn't hate who she used to be. She honored her. She didn't become powerful to prove a point. She became powerful because she stopped asking for permission to be whole. There was no grand finale. No dramatic fireworks, no viral after photo. No speech in front of a crowd. There was just a morning. One like any other, quiet, slow, simple. And in that quiet, Isabela felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, her new. Life didn't look like a magazine ad or a fitness influencer's reel. It looked like balance, waking up early without dreading the day. Cooking breakfast not to restrict calories, but to nourish her body. Looking in the mirror and seeing a woman, not a project. She went to therapy not because she was broken, but because she cared enough to keep healing. She moved her body regularly, sometimes running, sometimes dancing, sometimes just stretching in the sunlight. She made time for herself. She said no without guilt. She said yes only when it felt real. And the best part? She no longer waited for permission to be happy. Her relationships changed too. She attracted people who saw her completely, not just for how she looked now, but for her presence, her humor, her strength. She didn't tolerate passive insults or conditional kindness anymore. She built a life that fit her soul. And it showed, but it wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. Still moments of doubt, still shadows of the girl she used to be. But instead of running from her, Isabela welcomed her in. Because that girl was the reason she got here. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about building something beautiful on top of the pain and letting yourself live in it fully. One day, while walking in the park, Isabela passed a group of women laughing and talking. They reminded her of who she used to be, quiet and sure, sitting on the edges of things. She smiled, not because she was better than them, but because she knew exactly how they felt. And maybe, just maybe, they'd see her standing tall, confident, at ease, and believe it was possible for them too. That was the full circle, not a destination, but a return to self. This isn't a story about weight loss. It's a story about worth, about rising after shrinking, about choosing yourself and never apologizing for it again.